Well, this morning, as I hope was conveyed through the reading of the entire of this first section, it's now time for us to jump headfirst properly into the full narrative of the rest of the book of Genesis. We've done a few weeks of introductory background work, and so now we're diving into this first episode in the life of Joseph. And what I want to have us focus on is what, in my estimation, is quite clearly the emphasis of this text, and that is the clear act of evil and wickedness depicted in this opening section. There are evil deeds and wicked intentions behind the things happening here, and it is important for us to key in on just how horrible this event was and the grief that resulted from it in the house of Jacob. I think for many of us, if we are familiar at all with the book of Genesis and with the story of Joseph in particular, there's a tendency for us to maybe read something like this and jump to the conclusion that we know is coming in the future, that there's this grand pronouncement towards the end of this narrative, that when Joseph has his brothers restored to him and he reflects on this episode, Joseph will say that as for you, brothers, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. And in the end, that will hold true. But as we try to put ourselves in this particular story, and if you put yourself in the shoes of Joseph and then Jacob, that proclamation, at least at first, could be a very hard pill to swallow. I mean, it's a hard pill to swallow when any of us face true suffering and true evil. And it is fitting for Christians, believe it or not, to really do take a serious stock of the evil that is around us and of the suffering that we do experience. The problem of there being evil in the world and a good God permitting it is indeed a real problem. And whether you go to the halls of like literature and you think of the brothers Karamazov in that conflict between Ivan and Alyosha, when Ivan relays the story of the Inquisitor, and Ivan himself cannot bear the fact of God allowing children to suffer, and their suffering, for him at least, is completely unacceptable, makes God completely unbelievable. Or you think about your own personal life and the evils that you and those around you may have faced. When evil is happening, when you're under its thumb, when you are suffering, it is hard to see the bright side or to think of the good that can result from it. I mean, for any of you who've had friends gossip about you, slander you, in the midst of it, it's a horrible experience. If any of you have had the unfortunate experience of being robbed, of having someone steal your possessions, break into a car, God forbid, a home, or take something from you, in the moment of dealing with, of facing the offense and the violation of it, it's hard not to dwell on the wicked actions and the experience of being violated. In even more extreme cases, if someone has committed any sort of act of violence or violation of you and of your person, particularly if they've done it in secret, the shame and the burden and the confusion about undergoing such events are not easily discarded with the whimsical notion that God meant it somehow for your good. If you've suffered the untimely loss of a loved one, lost a child or a dear friend or a father, a spouse, a sibling, those are griefs, those are struggles that aren't easily forgotten, and for many of us, we continue to bear even as we go about our lives. No, the evil that befall the evils that befall us in life deserve to be named as evil, as sin, and our suffering, such as the suffering in this text, should never be overlooked. So that's what we want to endeavor to do this morning, to really dive into the suffering and all the bad actions, all the wrong decisions that are made in this particular narrative, and then wind up at the grief that Jacob will be left with in the end. We're going to cover this opening narrative under three headings, the first of which is this morning. Point number one, the evil motivations. Evil motivations. As we spoke about last week to some extent, that's all we talked about last week, this narrative begins by communicating to us something very clearly, that Joseph is the most beloved son of his father Jacob. Jacob shows both to Joseph's mother Rachel and to Joseph himself an absurd level of partiality. He is singled out. And that singling out is expressed in many ways. The text clearly tells us. And then, as we mentioned, Jacob adorns his son Joseph with this robe of many colors or many fabrics, meaning that it's an extravagant robe, that it is this outward physical representation of the love that Jacob has for his son Joseph. And so Jacob's favoritism, though, in this narrative, quite clearly is meant to provide motivation to the wicked and sinful actions of his other sons. And that motivation is going to propel the story forward and kick off the main events that's going to lead us through to the end of the book of Genesis. We're told repeatedly in this narrative that Joseph's brothers hate him. The first time that appears is in verse 4. And when the same thing is said over and over, it's important to take note. It says there that they see him and they hate him so much that they can't even speak peaceably to him. And this is before Joseph opens his mouth or does anything. But just by the sheer fact that the father prefers him, they hate him. But then once he starts to speak and relaying these dreams, well, they hate him even more. Jacob's dreams, beginning in verse 5, they make matters a lot worse. There are two variations on fundamentally the same type of dream, which depict the brothers and then eventually the entire house bowing down to Joseph. Joseph conveys through these dreams that he is to take a place of preeminence, of great significance in the household. And when he tells his brothers this, we're told both in verse 5 and in verse 8 that they hate him even more for his words and his dreams. And so they begin with hate. Joseph opens his mouth. They hate him even more for the dreams. And then they hate him just a little bit extra in case they didn't hate him enough for the words. There's also another motivation, though, if you pay attention closely, that it's not just the fact that he's the favorite, but or it's not just hatred that they despise him or that they're motivated by, but it's hatred coupled with a clear jealousy in verse 11. It says that the brothers, after hearing the two dreams, one of the sheaves and then the other of the moon and the sun and the 11 stars being the 12 brothers bowing down, that because of this, they don't just despise him, they actually are jealous. They envy him. You can hate something without being envious of it, but those two wicked things are coupled together, expressed through the brothers. And one of the things to wonder is obviously you have the favoritism that could motivate some jealousy, but what else are they jealous of? Is there anything else in particular? And there clearly is, because they're not just jealous of his position with the father, but they're also jealous because of the dreams. Because Joseph seems to have this special place and the favor of God upon them, because he is receiving from God this supernatural gift, this ability. He is receiving God's revelation, that it's not just a matter of lineage or a matter of his status in the family, but no, he has received insight, wisdom, revelation from God. It'll become clear in time that these gifts that Joseph possesses, that these are prophetic gifts. These are gifts to discern the mind of God. When Jacob acknowledges that, he doesn't just blow off the dreams of Joseph as something that's annoying or something that can be overlooked, but it tells us in verse 11 that Jacob keeps the saying in mind, that Jacob knows what is behind these dreams. So the brothers have these dual motivations of hatred, sheer hatred, but also jealousy. Jealousy for his status, and jealousy because of Joseph's, jealous because of the favor that God has shown to Joseph as well. And so it's because of this hatred and this jealousy that we're propelled forward as the brothers take action. So the second thing that I want us to see, point number 2 this morning, is betrayal of, the betrayal of brothers. The betrayal of brothers. Things kick into high gear in verse 12. We're told that the 12 sons, or that the other 11 sons at this point, that they've been commissioned by the father to go and shepherd the father's flock, that they're to shepherd the sheep of Israel. It's important that we note that the name used here indeed is Israel. The sons are sent out in this particular territory, the area of Shechem, to tend the flocks. And while he sends them, for whatever his motivation, Israel calls Joseph to himself and asks and commissions him, sends him to go and to check up on his brothers and to give a report. Go now, he says in verse 14, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word. So he's commissioned by his father to go and to check on them and then to bring back a report. Joseph, always eager to please. He responds, okay, here I am. I'm ready to go. Send me, which his father does. And he goes out to the land of Shechem, and he can't find his brothers. They are nowhere to be found. And we're told that someone finds him wandering. Joseph inquires about where his brothers are, and he finds out that his brothers have left that area. In other words, they've disobeyed the instructions of their father, and they've all traveled to this place of Dothan. Jacob, therefore, travels to find them, and as they see him afar off, in verse 18, we're told that before he comes near, the brothers conspire to kill him, to kill him, and to throw him in a pit. Here comes the streamer, they say mockingly. Let's kill him, throw him in a pit. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of the dreams. Yeah, it's worth pausing to just ponder how extreme that is. I mean, I don't know how bad your sibling rivalries might have gotten. I mean, how tough things have, if you've come to blows, or if you are currently in a state of a strife with your sibling. As bad as things have got with me and my siblings at times, maybe I was guilty of like anger, or maybe or perhaps just like sheer indifference at times. But to want to kill, and to conspire to kill, and to just cast your sibling off into a pit. Now, you may have felt that in a flash, but seriously, this is a rather troubling and unusual thing, that the brothers go this far, that they want to kill this boy, that for some reason that their hatred and their jealousy runs so strong that they want to kill him and to throw him into a ditch. But nevertheless, that is what they resolve to do. I mean, it's quite clear that it's going to happen. These plans are going to come to fruition, and so the rest of the family, so the brothers are left with the decision to follow through or to change plans slightly. And we see two variations, or two changes to the plan. Two brothers who speak up and try to alter what the whole of the 11 are going to do to Joseph. The first of which is, in verse 21, is his brother Reuben. Now, if you recall, Reuben is the eldest brother, but he's also the brother who sinned greatly. He tried to usurp his place on the line of inheritance. And so Reuben speaks up, and we find some interesting things here with him. We see in verse 22 that he He tries to intervene and say to them, okay, let's not go so far as to just slaughtering him, shedding his blood, slitting his throat. That's a bit much. Let's just throw him into the pit, and then he can, whatever becomes of him, becomes of him. So there's no reason to spill blood. He'll die anyways. Let's just be merciful and throw him into this pit. And we're given a little bit of insight into his motivation there as well. It tells us that even though he tells the brothers, let's not slaughter him. Let's just cast him into the pit with his whole body. We're told that he does that because he desires to rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father. Now, the positive reading, or the best reading of this, is he really has a lot of mercy. He doesn't want to harm him at all. He actually wants to save his brother for the sake of his brother. But then you get this little note that he wants to do it to present him to his father. And there's a sense in which, this one who's already been disinherited, he might just be motivated and trying to get back on the good graces of his father. So it might not be completely altruistic or sincere, but at least he desires, and for whatever his motivation, to spare his brothers. Well, the brothers decide to go along with it, we're told. They're like, hey, that sounds good. So they strip him of his coat. They throw him, presumably naked, into the pit to die. And then we have another brother, Judah, who has now, even though he's the fourth born, he has come to be or he has risen to primacy amongst the brothers. Judah, he sees an opportunity as well. But his motivations are also quite clear. Verses 24 and 25, Judah speaks up. That's verses 25 and 26. He wants to not just kill Joseph. That would be a waste. Why not make a buck? Why not profit off of this scheme that we have started? Here's the Ishmaelites, our kinsmen who are traveling nearby. They're around. They are very clearly presented in the text as traders of some sort. He's like, why don't we just sell Joseph to them? So the same effect, he'll be discarded of. Father won't have him, but we'll at least have made a buck in the process. Well, once again, the brothers agree to do this. They assent, but their plans are foiled in verse 28 because we're told that there were another group of Abrahamites traveling. These are Abrahamites through the line of Lot. There are Midianites. They happen to be passing by. They pass by the pit. They see Joseph. They dig him out, and then they sell him to the Ishmaelites. And so Judah's plans are thwarted. He can't profit. And as we continue on, Reuben finds out that his plans to rescue Joseph and return him to his father, that is thwarted as well. Verse 29, when Reuben returns to the pit, he sees that Joseph is not in there. And so he tears his clothes. And so the brothers finally, having stripped Joseph of his robe, they come to the resolution that here's what we'll do. Let's slaughter a goat, and let's take the robe, dip the robe in the blood, stage it to make it look like Joseph was attacked by a wild animal, and present the robe to their father. And that is exactly what they endeavor to do. But the reason why we just summarize that and we recount things in case there was any confusion about what happened is that every step of the way, every next phase of the plan is altogether evil and wicked. I mean, the one thing that we can say is that the brothers all have bad intentions for Joseph. That they've allowed all the hate and jealousy that has been built up to lead into sin. And there's no other way to describe their offense against Joseph as acts of wickedness and evil, that being the point. I mean, Joseph has been violated, he's been persecuted and been subjected to incredible suffering at the hands of his own kin, his brothers. Their actions are altogether evil. And their proximity to Joseph, their closeness to him by relation, make the offenses all the more damaging and hurtful and wicked. These acts of evil committed by the brothers within the household it's certainly not how you would expect things to go in the line of Abraham and in the chosen line of Jacob, that is Israel. Well, we see the betrayal of brothers, secondly, in the story. The third thing that I just want to touch on in conclusion is point number 3, the grief of Jacob. The conclusion to this part of the narrative quite clearly lands squarely on the grief that these people experience. I mean, oddly enough, you first see a lot of grief and sorrow with Reuben in verses 29 to 30. Once again, when he returns to the pit, he sees that Joseph is not in there. He tears his clothes, and he laments to his brothers, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" Now again, this, by turning to himself and focusing on himself and the consequences for himself, really does lead you to believe that his motivations were more about trying to regain status in the family, that he was hoping to present Joseph back to the father to get back on Israel's good graces. Yet, nevertheless, things do not work out. Grief, though, like the real grief, the sincere grief, is experienced by Jacob when the sons come back. Verse 32, they present the robe to the father, and tell him, "This is what we have found." And they ask him, they're bold enough as if they don't know. They ask the father, "Identify your son's robe or not. Is this your son's robe or not?" It's kind of like a sick and twisted Jacob and Esau going before Isaac, and him having to feel his way when he's blind and decide and determine who is Esau. Here, they present this to Jacob, and he identifies it. It is my son's robe, and they manipulate their father into believing and confessing on his own that an animal must have devoured him. And that Joseph, sadly, in verse 33, is without a doubt, according to Israel's belief, torn into pieces. Without a doubt, Jacob, that is Israel, believes that his son, his favorite son, his promised son, the one also whom God has been revealing things to, which is key, has died, that he has been devoured and torn to pieces by the wild beast. And so Jacob ends the chapter in grief. He enters into a time of mourning. He tears his own clothes, and he puts sackcloth on his loins, and he mourns for his son many days, trying to emphasize that this is a prolonged state of grief and of mourning. No one else, we're told, is able to comfort him. Not his other sons, not his daughters, nobody. And he ends with this confession that, "No, I now shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." And so what that means is that Jacob expects that for the rest of his life, until the day that he dies, he's going to be in this state of mourning. He sees no light at the end of the tunnel. He doesn't anticipate for himself things turning around or having happiness restored to him at all. He expects to become a man who is bitter with grief all the way until the day that he dies, until he reaches the grave. He's going to go to Sheol, meaning he's going to die mourning for his son Joseph. Now, there's a lot going on here in this particular passage. You can preach like a good 3 or 4 I'm not going to do it. This is already my second. But you can preach like a good 3 or 4 sermons on this particular passage. It was hard to just fix in on one thing. We're just focusing on grief and evil and suffering this morning. But there are some just unique things I want to point out in terms of how this is framed and set up for the people of Israel who would receive this story. That there are great parallels and repetition, once again, recapitulation happening in this story that does tell the story of Israel as a whole and of the people of God even beyond that. Notice that Joseph, once again, is named Israel throughout this particular, Jacob is named Israel through this particular story. And so the story as a whole is you have Israel sending out his sons to shepherd, and it makes very clear, his sheep, to oversee and to care for the possessions of Israel, his particular sheep. And they're sent out. But the sons of Israel fail in their obligation and their job to shepherd the flock. And so what does Israel do? Israel sends to them a messenger. He sends to the people a mouthpiece, someone who is to both see what they're doing and then give a report on the doings of the sons. And this messenger is one who is receiving revelation, that he speaks with the voice of God. He's receiving visions and has this unique and special calling upon him. Even the way in which Joseph is sent out. I mean, when when Israel commissions him, Joseph responds with those words, here am I, or here I am. When he's seeking someone to be commissioned out on his behalf, that way Joseph responds should make you think of a prophet, because indeed that is one of the paradigms here. When you think about the Old Testament, and you think about the people of Israel who were charged or who were given a charge but disregard it, when the prophet comes to them and they despise the prophets for their prophecy, and what do the people of Israel do to the prophets? Well, they kill them. They kill them. They take those who receive the revelation of God and they put them to death. But once again, it's not just a story of Israel in the Old Testament, but it's the story of the people of God and the true Israel of God throughout history. Ultimately, God does send a messenger, a particular son, to his people to deliver them a message. And what do? Well, they kill him. They kill the chosen son. They betray the beloved son, Jesus Christ. And yet, in this story, speaking of Genesis, or the people of Israel, or the coming of Christ, the scripture never overlooks and never stops to focus and place the blame of evil acts squarely on the people who are perpetrating them. For it was evil of the brothers to kill Joseph, and it was evil for the people to kill Jesus Christ. It's a thing that the Apostle Peter preaches, that we hear repeatedly. Christ was put to death at the hands of sinful men. And Joseph was conspired against and almost put to death by the hands of his sinful and evil brothers. Because of that evil, the result is real grief, sorrow, and suffering, particularly seen through Israel, who again thinks that he's going to be in that state for the rest of his days. And the fact that this text is doubling down on the evilness and the wickedness of what's taking place here is also seen through one very, very clear, once you point it out, one clear aspect of this passage. There is one thing conspicuously absent from this opening chapter. Who doesn't speak, who is not named, who is not referenced at all in this particular opening passage. There's a key figure you would think would be there when you're reading your Bible who is silent and who is absent. There's no God in this passage. God is silent. He's not mentioned once. God doesn't grant any comfort, God doesn't reveal any particular plans. The only way in which God, that we can deduce that he's involved is in the giving of the dreams to Joseph. If Jacob knows, if Israel knows, as we say, if he takes it, if he remembers, if he takes to heart Joseph's dreams, and he knows that God is revealing himself through Joseph now, Joseph's death, we can presume, or we can assume for Jacob, would lead him to believe that God's word has failed. God is not there to comfort him in his grief, that he's stuck in that state of not knowing where things are going, not knowing how it's going to work out, and having no clue, no inclination that the son that was lost and killed by evil men would in the end be returned to him. Not just be returned, but also be the source of his salvation. The shape of the life of Joseph is very Christ-like, and the whole scope of the narrative is going to take a turn for rejoicing. It is that unexpected happy ending, that eucatastrophe. But at the beginning of the story, in the very opening, we're stuck in grief and suffering. And suffering for Jacob when God feels most distant. I mean, God went from wrestling with him, he was that close, to not saying anything. In our times of great sorrow and grief and the trials that we face, it can feel to be very much in the same place. That when things are hardest, it can feel as though God is silent, that he's distant. And yet, we are those who grieve sincerely and truly in life. We don't grieve as those who have no hope. There are a couple times in Scripture where we're left like this, without much else to say, like in the Psalter, and yet we can't read this story as though we haven't heard it before and know where it's going. But what we can do, though, I mean, it's like trying to watch like a movie with the twist ending when you already know the twist. Like, you know what's coming, and you can enjoy it, but it's never the same experience twice. You can't watch The Sixth Sense 2 times as though you never watched it the first. He's a ghost, by the way. The whole time, he's a ghost. Okay, sorry. Anyways, no. But knowing the end of the story, though, I think for us is that it should help us as people to be compassionate and loving, to be compassionate and loving Christians who can be patient with those who grieve, to be merciful to those who grieve and to suffer, to take pity and to mourn with those who mourn, and to give time of suffering and sorrow and mourning its space to be. It's better to go into the houses of mourning sometimes, as Kohelet tells us. And that is the case in this particular text here. So may we, as those who struggle in our own right, look out at those who suffer and suffer the effects of evil with great compassion and with great mercy. And rather than jumping to trying to make everything resolve in a happy ending, may we just show mercy, trust Christ, and be there for each other, and trust that God will not stay silent for long, in which he indeed will not in our story, and he does not in our lives as well. Let's pray.